What's up guys, welcome back to Pilot School. In this week's episode we're going to be covering backdrops, reverse flight, and switches. So before we get into this episode, there's some things we got to go over. Basically, when I first introduced reverse flying to the community, it basically ruined jet stunting on YouTube. And the reason because of this is everyone basically picked up reverse flight really fast, and then that's all you see. And the reason all you see is reverse flight is because the thing about reverse flying is it's 10 times easier to stunt with. Now, if you don't know how to fly in reverse, you probably already don't know this, or if you're still learning it, then you probably don't know this already. But without having to hover, you can fly slow. So you don't need to hover and you can still fly slow, which means you don't have to worry about drops, you don't have to worry about stalling, and on top of all of that, you can also make your turns way sharper. So because of all these things, it makes doing any stunt in reverse, as long as it's not like a straightaway, way easier to do. So when you basically give a bunch of people a way that they can make stunting way easier for themselves, but at the same time look really, really talented to anyone who doesn't know better, they're gonna take full advantage of it. So anytime you look at a stunt and you want to know whether or not it's actually a good reverse stunt or not, basically look at the stunt, look at the gaps they get, look how many gaps they hit, the path they took, and ask yourself, would I be impressed if they did this forward? If you wouldn't be impressed by that same stunt being done forwards, then keep in mind that it was way easier and less impressive for them to do it backwards. Now, what's even worse about it is you see a lot of people out there posting montages and the entire montage is reverse flying, and then they'll literally only hit like 1 or 2 gaps every single stunt. Like they might do like 3 gaps. If I did 2 to 3 gaps in any forward stunt, I would get laughed at. So when you see all these people who are taking something that is secretly easier to stunt with and doing that little with it, it's just embarrassing. So there's all these people out there who don't know this already, and it's stuff that I didn't put in the original reverse flying tutorial, and I wish I did, because if I had put it in there, maybe this wouldn't have happened. But because I didn't put it in there, so many people took advantage of it right away. And since then, for like the last year, pretty much every montage you see is just like destroyed with reverse flying. It's just like 1 or 2 gaps reverse flying. And then another thing that I want to go over before we get into the actual tutorial is never mess around with the Hydra with any of this stuff. The Hydra, if you're not in the pilot community or you're new to the pilot community, then you might not have heard this yet, but if you're an actual pilot, you already know. The Hydra is what we call the training wheels jet. Now, if you're a moto stunter, I can make this pretty clear for you guys. Basically, when we go to a montage and we see the Hydra, it's the same as you guys going to a moto montage and the dude's using boost. It also makes stunting 10 times easier, and this is basically because of the rudders. It also stabilizes better and flies slower and hovers better, but it's mostly the rudders. You can go in the hangar and do the entire hangar lap after lap, and it completely stay leveled the entire time because those rudders will do everything. And then when you're in reverse with it, you don't have to sway the jet to keep it going. The rudders are strong enough to keep the tail down, or even fight the gravity and bring the tail straight down again, so it makes everything way easier. So when you see people who are doing montages and the montage itself is basically every stunt is 2 to 3 gaps, sometimes only 1 gap, the entire montage is done in reverse and they're using the Hydra, that stuff right there I click away from right away. That is the dumbest stuff I could see on YouTube. But people who don't know this stuff yet will watch it and basically be like, oh, that's pretty epic, that's awesome, you're using a new jet, you're doing some reverse flying. So basically they might blow it up, but no, I just wanted to get that info out there, so when you guys take this tutorial and start learning how to do it and start making montages yourself, you never do any of these things, because this is stuff that people didn't know before. So now I'm putting it out there so that you guys know to do better than that. So basically there's only 2 times you should be doing reverse flight stunts. The first one is if you're doing switch stunting, in which case the entire stunt is not just in reverse. It might either start in reverse or start forwards, but then it switches. And if the entire stunt is all 100% backwards, then you need to have like a minimum of 10 gaps, and it has to be like some tricky gaps too, otherwise it's just a waste. 5 gaps in reverse is like decent, so keep that in mind, and let's get on to the tutorial. Alright, so we're going to start off with the backdrop. Now the backdrop is basically just the start of reverse flying, and then you whip it around. And a lot of people have done like really bad copies of this where they don't actually do it, but they'll call it a backdrop, and where they basically just, when they whip around, they nosedive. And that's just stalling out, that's not backdropping. You just need to think, if you were closer to the ground, you'd be dead in that situation. So basically start off a backdrop, you want to do what you do when you hover. and then your jet's going to begin to stall out as it can no longer climb because you're not giving it enough power. And basically at this point, you just want to kind of spin the camera around like you normally would, or look in reverse, it's really up to you, and let it fall backwards. And immediately you want to pick a side, so I'm going to go to the right, so I'm going to press L1 left bumper, and then as soon as it falls onto its side, I'm going to press and hold R1 right bumper. I'm going to let the tail get a little bit higher, and I'm going to push up on the analog stick to whip it around. Now, there's a difference on how far you spin, which is based on how high your tail is compared to your nose, but we're going to cover that a little later into this episode. Alright, so learning to fly backwards is really easy to do, but you're going to need the hovering controls, so if you don't know how to hover yet, go back and watch the hovering tutorial, the link's in the description, and basically what you want to do is you want to start hovering straight up into the sky. Now you need to be straight up, because if you're not, when you stall out, your nose is going to whip over and flip around, and then you're going to nose dive. So the way I like to make sure I'm doing this is I'll look in reverse by clicking in the right analog stick, and as soon as I drop into reverse, I let go of it, push it to the side, and let it spin around so that it'll tail my nose, so I don't have to worry about the camera work anymore. Now I'm only using the landing gear to slow down faster. It doesn't matter at all if you use it or not. And basically while you're hovering up, you're not putting enough power behind the jet to continue climbing, so you're going to eventually slow down and then stop on the spot. My jet is beginning to stop right now, and as soon as you see your jet stop, you want to keep hovering for about 1 more second, and then you no longer want to press the hovering controls anymore. That way you're going to let your jet fall, and the only thing you want to worry about at this point is the rudder controls. Now right away you need to choose which side you're going to fall to into a night flight, and whatever side you want to fall to, you're going to use the opposite rudder controls to do it. So I'm going to the right, so I'm going to press L1 left bumper, but if you want it to fall to your left, you press R1 right bumper. And basically you don't want to press it for too long, because then you can whip around too fast and nosedive on yourself. So at this point right here, I kind of let go of it and I let gravity do the rest, because it's still going to fall like this for me. And as soon as you get into the night flight perfectly on your side, what you want to do is press and hold the same rudder as the side you fell to. So if I'm going to the right, I'm going to press and hold R1 right bumper at this point right now. If I went to the left, once I got onto my side in the night flight, I'd be pressing and holding L1 left bumper. Now basically what this is doing for you is you're using the rudders to try and fight gravity to push the tail down while gravity is trying to pull the nose down, and that's going to stabilize your jet and lock it in the night flight. But the rudders on the laser are too weak to keep fighting it, so you need a little assistance. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to lean my one wing over a little bit. That way I can start using my elevators. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my elevators to assist my rudders with keeping the tail of the jet down slightly, or keeping it leveled with the nose. Now this is just how you glide in reverse. These controls are all going to come into play with what I'm going to tell you next, but basically to accelerate in reverse is the same as kind of like hovering. So you're going to use the exact same controls while gliding in reverse to accelerate in reverse. You're going to hold down L2 left trigger and tap R2 right trigger. Basically there is no brakes for aircraft. There's forward acceleration and reverse acceleration, and basically L2 is just reverse acceleration. So when you're falling in reverse, if you hold it down, you're going to begin accelerating in reverse, and then you're only tapping R2 right trigger to keep the engine light on, because otherwise it'll just turn off on you and then you'll drop out of the sky. Now because I'm leaning to the one side, you can tell that I keep going around in circles. This is just how you turn. If you don't want to keep going in circles, which you probably don't, what you want to do to keep going in one direction is you want to kind of swing with the jet. Basically just want to sway side to side. I'm going to start doing it for you right now. I'm going to rock the wing at the top over to the other side. That way, because I'm leaning to the other side, I'm going to start turning the other way, and then I'm going to roll it back over again so I can go back the other way. And you're basically just going to keep on doing this so that you can keep going in one direction. So that's all it really is. It's real simple to learn. You just want to hover up, let yourself stall out, use the rudders to fall into a night flight on one side. Make sure you mess around with the camera angle. If you were looking in reverse, you push it to the side to spin it around so that it'll tail with the nose, so you don't have to worry about it like I do. And then basically if you want to accelerate, just hold down the same hover controls, hold down L2 left trigger, tap R2 right trigger. Make sure you never let go of the rudder that you're using to stabilize yourself on the side. Right now I am still holding R1 right bumper to keep myself stabilized there, holding down L2 left trigger the entire time, and just tapping R2 right trigger, and then I'm just doing the rest with the analog stick. It's real easy. It's a little bit of fun. If you are new to it, you might have a little bit of trouble at first, but if you practice it for about an hour, you'll get real good at it real fast. So earlier I mentioned that there's a difference when whipping around doing the backdrop on how much you turn. And basically what I'm going to teach you now is how to perform a switch. A switch is basically when you change from one form of stunting, one technique to another. Right now, basically, if you're in reverse and you want to flip around to forward, performing a switch is just the last part of a backdrop. Basically, it's just about using the tail and the level of the tail and pressing up on the analog stick to flip around without dropping. Now, how much you spin at this point changes depending on how high your tail is. So the higher your tail is, the less you're gonna spin. So right now for this first one, I'm gonna show you, I'm gonna put my tail really high, push up on the analog stick, and I'm barely gonna turn it all. I'm not really gonna rotate so much, I'm just gonna kind of level out. Now, coming at it again, I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna drop if I wanna perform a switch, but this time I wanna do a full 180, so I'm not gonna put the tail as high as it was last time. Now, I kind of screwed this up a little bit. I didn't like line it up properly with the next gap, so I had to kind of keep letting my jet fall back so that I could fly over this thing. But you notice that I made a lot more of a spin that time because my tail wasn't as high as it was before when I pushed up on the analog stick to whip it around. One last time, so this time I want to overspin it. I want to spin farther than the 180. Basically, this time I want to be almost leveled. I want my tail almost leveled with the nose when I press up. So right here, spin it around, overspins past the 180. Don't make the full turn all the way as far as I want to go, so I'm just going to keep on turning to help it out get there. So basically, it's real simple. The higher your tail, the less you spin. The lower your tail, the more you spin. Alright, so one more thing I want to teach you guys is how to roll in reverse. Now this is pretty simple to do, but it's going to involve you constantly changing which controls you're using to stabilize the jet, and you want to make sure that you're always accelerating when you're doing this, otherwise you won't have enough power to complete the roll. Now what you want to do is you want to begin rolling over, but you're going to notice at the very moment halfway through the roll when you're leveled out with the ground, that is the most dangerous point where your gravity can grab your nose and pull it down, and you're not going to be on your side, so you're not going to be able to use your rudders to fight against the gravity. So basically this is where your elevators come in. So I'm going to do it right now. I'm going to slow it down, and you're going to notice at this point here, while I'm leveled out and I can't use my rudders, I'm going to quickly go to my elevators and start pushing them down to pull the tail down. That way I can fight against gravity when gravity is trying to pull the nose down still, because gravity is always going to be trying to pull your nose down. So at that point right there, while you're leveled out, you're just going to switch to your elevators and use them to push the tail down. Now I'm going to slow it down. I'm going to go one more time and do it again. I'm going to walk you through the controls through it, pretty basic step by step. Right now I'm pressing R1, I'm accelerating reverse, I'm holding down R1 to stabilize my jet so that the nose doesn't fall down, and as I begin to roll over, as I begin to level out, that R1 rudder, right bumper rudder, is no longer going to begin working. So at this point right here, I'm going to be using the elevators at the back to push down to keep fighting against gravity, and then as I continue to roll over to the other side, I'm going to let go of my elevator and now begin pressing the opposite rudder than what I was pressing when I started. So now I'm pressing and holding L1 left bumper. So basically I went from R1 right bumper to the elevators pulling down to L1 left bumper in the whole roll. So it's pretty simple. You basically just have to roll your hand from one side of the controls to the other side of the controls to always be fighting against the gravity, which is going to be trying to pull your nose down. So once you get that part down, you'll find it real simple to do. If you want to do the full roll, as soon as you roll over, you just continue rolling again, but you're going to notice that it kind of throws you out of motion a lot and it makes your jet go a little crazy. But if you practice it a lot, you'll get really good with it, and then you'll have a lot of fun with it. Alright, so let's finish this episode up. Basically, one thing I didn't get to talk about was that if you're on next gen, you won't be able to fly in reverse the same as you could on last gen. Basically, the difference is they nerfed the reverse accelerator on next gen consoles, so you can't fly in reverse forever like you could back on last gen. If you want to do it forever, then you have to go back on last gen. Like on last gen, you could be really close to the ground already, and you can climb all the way back up to the highest point of sky in reverse. On next gen, you can't do that. Once you get close to the ground, you either have to land or switch out of it. Another thing that I didn't get the chance to talk about is basically when you're stunting in reverse, like you can see me doing right now. Right now, I'm not actually accelerating in reverse. I only actually accelerated at one part of this entire stunt. When you stunt in reverse, you'll find that it's a lot smoother and a lot more steady and easier to control if you just let it glide in reverse. So one good thing that you can try doing when stunting in reverse is only actually accelerate when you need to. When you think you're going to slow down or when you're going to go on an incline, then accelerate. For the rest of the stunt, you can just glide. Anytime you're going to be going down and picking up an actual speed, you can just glide on it. You don't actually have to reverse the entire stunt. You'll actually find it a lot better if you just glide through the stunt and only accelerate it sometimes when it's required. Alright, so that wraps it up. Make sure you keep in mind everything I talked about at the beginning of this episode. Don't make the same mistakes a lot of other people have made. This is Mario out.